Why is the Torah not obvious to everyone? So for those of us that have realized that Elohim still wants us to do what is good and right in His sight, that what is good and right in the sight of Elohim still matters, therefore the Torah still matters, for those of us that have accepted that fact, we've probably wondered at one point or another, why is this not obvious to everyone? It's so obvious, and indeed it is. It's so obvious to us, and it's so obvious to some other people, but why is it not obvious to everyone? It seems like some people just cannot see it. How can that be? And one answer that commonly comes up is it must just be about Elohim hardening or softening hearts. And we can see this in the Torah, that Elohim did harden, for example, the heart of Pharaoh. And we can also see that he gave wisdom to the hearts of certain people also. That there could be this factor of Elohim hardening or softening hearts. But one thing I want to caution us about is, how do we know? How do we know that someone's heart is hardened? Just because we attempted to present something to them, just because we attempted to show them the truth of the Torah, does not automatically mean their heart is hardened just because they didn't immediately accept it. It may be something else going on, because there are a number of things that could be at play. There are a number of factors that could contribute to this. And part of it could just be, maybe we didn't present the information in the most effective way. Or maybe we didn't present all of the information that was necessary for that person. It could be any number of things, so I don't think we should just jump to the hardening of hearts idea. So I believe there are a number of factors that could be relevant. And in this video, I want to talk about expectations. And in looking at this, I want to tell you about an experiment that was done that relates to expectations. So there was this experiment where participants were asked to identify playing cards. The person would be shown a playing card for a brief period of time, like Ace of Spades or something like that, and then be asked, what was that card you were just shown? And so the person would then say, okay, that was the Ace of Spades. And they would be shown just different cards for a brief period of time, and they'd have to identify them. And where this got interesting, though, was the addition of certain abnormal cards. That while most of the cards were of the normal 52 card deck variety that we're all familiar with, while most of those cards were that way, some of them were abnormal. For example, they had a card that looked identical to a normal spades card, but that it was red instead of black. That even though it was a spade and even though it had the number and all of that, just like a normal spades card, that it was all red. And also they had a hearts card that instead of being red, it was black. So there was a red spades card and a black hearts card. And so whenever they were being shown these for just a brief period of time, most people didn't notice it. Most people just assumed it was one of these normal cards. And over time, they started increasing how much time they gave them to look at the card. So they would show the card for a longer period of time. And at that point, people started becoming uncomfortable. People started becoming confused about what they were seeing. And for a lot of people, it certainly was not immediate that they realized what was going on. It took some time, and they became increasingly less comfortable, increasingly more confused, and for some of them, finally it just, oh, okay, I see what's going on. But for some of the other people, they actually started hallucinating. They actually started to see something that was not there. Some of them reported seeing a mixture of red and black on the card, even though the card was just red or just black. There was no mixture. They were literally hallucinating something that was not there. And yet, eventually, they were sometimes able to realize what was actually going on over time. But some of the people were never able to realize, they were never able to orient to what was going on. They never figured it out. So in this experiment, by the end of it, most of the people had realized what was going on, but some of them were unable to. Now, we can probably already imagine how this might apply to issues like the biblical text. Because, like with playing cards, we already have expectations going into it. We have expectations about, okay, it's going to be the 52 card deck variety, 4 suits and so forth, face cards, ace card, etc. We already have beliefs about these playing cards, even though they're not really beliefs of any significance. Or we just know about it, and that's a category we're familiar with. So we have these expectations of what we're going to see. And then we see more things that validate that. We see normal cards, and so we think, oh, okay, yeah, our expectations are right. And whenever we see those abnormal ones, the first thing we jump to is not our expectations must have been wrong. Some people jump to hallucinating, or jump to just being confused and not knowing how to deal with it. And playing cards are an issue that we don't have much emotional investment in. Who cares if our beliefs about playing cards were wrong? Who cares if we thought these playing cards were normal cards and then it turned out they weren't? If it actually causes that much confusion and that much difficulty in orienting to that information with playing cards, think about how much more difficulty could be present, how much more investment we have with theological issues, with what we expect the biblical text or the scripture to say. And for most of us, even if we have never looked at the scripture, we already have expectations built up around it. We've heard people talk about it, we've heard people teach it, we probably already have beliefs about what it says. And even much more so if we have looked at it before, if we're already pretty well familiar with it, especially if we have focused entirely upon Pauline teachings. This is what we have come to know as the biblical teaching. These are the expectations that we have built up, and this is the paradigm we have when we look at it. So whenever we introduce new information, like information that shows that the Torah still matters, that shows that Elohim still cares about what is good and right in his sight, the initial inclination is not, let me change my entire expectation about what should be in the text. The initial inclination is, there must be some way that this fits with my expectations. And if there isn't a way that it obviously can be construed that way, maybe we hallucinate some way that it could be. And probably for a lot of us, we've had this experience where we've shown someone a verse or a passage that demonstrates that the Torah matters. And the response has been for them to become uncomfortable, to become obviously troubled, and then to come back with some interpretation that makes just no sense, that does not fit with what it says at all, maybe even hallucinating that it says the opposite of what it actually says. We've probably witnessed something like that before, and this is just part of it, is this expectations factor, that we have this paradigm and this belief about what the text should say. Now, in considering this and considering how it affects whether people are able to see the obviousness of the Torah, this should not be an opportunity for us to think about, oh, that applies to them. Because in seeing it go on for other people, this should be a first step in realizing it also goes on for us. That we are susceptible to that same process. That this is just a human condition. It's just a way that our mind tries to work, a mental shortcut, and everyone is susceptible to it. And we probably all are still doing it in regard to one thing or another. Like for me personally, I remember that even though I was already believing in the Torah and already studying the Torah, and I looked over a number of passages and read through the Torah before, I had looked over where it talks about the rituals and the sacrifices. I had looked over it over and over, and I surely had to have read, I surely had to have seen with my eyes where it said the tabernacle, that the ritual is done at the opening of the tent of meeting, the opening of the tent of meeting, the opening of the tent of meeting. I had to have seen that over and over and over, and it basically never entered my mind, seemingly. That instead, I still had the belief of, oh, okay, the ritual's being done at the temple. The temple. So even though it said the tent of meeting, I didn't even realize there was anything contradicting my belief about the temple at that time. My expectations were that I was just going to see validation for the whole temple idea, and not even realize the Torah talks about the tent of meeting as where we are to do the rituals. And so that's one personal example that eventually I had a paradigm shift. It wasn't just the addition of new information. It was that my attention started being drawn to that outside of just reading it, that I became aware of the tent of meeting as being a thing to pay attention to, as being a thing of potential relevance. And so my mind got cued to look for that, to draw attention to it. And because of that paradigm shift, eventually I was able to realize it is emphasized in the Torah. I just never saw it before. And this might also take place with how we interpret certain commands. Because most of us, we didn't just learn the Torah from the Torah exactly, not strictly speaking. Usually whenever we came to the truth of the Torah, we were coming at it because someone was helping us, guide us along the way, teaching us about the commands along the way, or because maybe we wondered about a verse and we looked it up on the internet and saw a traditional interpretation or something like that. We were exposed to these initial understandings for different commands. And at a point, we stop seeing exactly what the words say. We have this potential to start projecting what we assume the command is upon the text of the command. So no longer are we seeing exactly what it says, even if we should have the ability to do that. Instead, whenever we're thinking about it, we're thinking about our observance of it, our beliefs about it, what we think the command means. So these are some things that we have to be careful about, because even though we might think about, the Torah is so obvious to us, it's not obvious to other people, and they're just hallucinating about the text sometimes, or they just don't want to believe it because of all the emotional investment and all of that there are all these underlying issues that could be at play. While recognizing that, we also have to recognize that maybe we can learn from that. Maybe that might apply to us in other ways too. So this is something to be cautious about, that our expectations have a strong influence on us, on what we are able to see, on whether we're even able to recognize new information, and so much more so if we are emotionally invested in it. So this is something to beware in our observance as well. Thanks for watching, and remember the commands. Shalom.